This is a review of trigonometry. This part is covering what the trig identities mean and finding the angle of a triangle. So trig identities are fractions of different side lengths of a right triangle. That's literally all that they are. They're just the fraction values of different sides of a right triangle. We label the sides based on which angle of the right triangle we're looking at. We call the sides opposite for the farthest side from the angle, adjacent for the side next to the angle, and hypotenuse for the hypotenuse of the triangle. So on this right triangle here, this would be the opposite side. It's the farthest from the angle. This is the adjacent side. It's adjacent next to the angle, and it's not the hypotenuse. And this is the longest side, so this would be the hypotenuse. If I were to move the angle to this side, I can see that the opposite side is now on the bottom here, and the adjacent side is now up there. So those two sides switched, but the hypotenuse stayed the same. So the opposite and adjacent depend on which angle you're looking at in the triangle. The trig functions appear here on your calculator. You can see that sine, cosine, and tangent are all right here. Make sure that before you do math in this class, you've pressed mode on your calculator. And when you open up mode, you've set the setting for angles to degrees rather than radians. We don't work with radians in this class. We'll always be using degrees. So if you're getting strange results for your numbers, just click mode and make sure that you've pressed degrees rather than radians. So these are what the three trig identities mean. Sine of an angle is just the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. Cosine is the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse, and tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. So as an example, I'm going to make up some numbers and say this triangle has one side that's 3, one side that's 4, and one side that's 5, like this. That actually fits the Pythagorean theorem. So I'm going to find the value of all three trig identities, sine, cosine, and tangent. And to do that, the first thing I need to do is identify which side is opposite, which side is adjacent, and which side is the hypotenuse. And I can see that the opposite side is the side farthest from the angle, so that will be the 3. I'm going to call that blue. The adjacent side is the side next to the angle that's not the hypotenuse, so that's 4. And the hypotenuse is 5. So now that I've identified these, I can just plug them into my trig identities and see what those values are. So sine is 3 over 5, opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is 4 over 5, and tangent is 3 over 4. So these are their literal values for that triangle. So again, all that trig identities are the ratios of two sides of a right triangle, nothing else. I can now compare the trig identities for the second angle up here. I'm going to call this the green angle instead. And I can see that for this green angle, the 3 is now the adjacent side, the 4 is the opposite side, and the 5 is the hypotenuse. So plugging this in, these are the trig identities for that other second angle of the triangle.